Just letting everybody's in. So thank you everybody for attending today. Today we're going to discuss a report that we recently released alongside with Forrester to talk about, one of our clients actually who achieved more than 200% ROI using our platform or, an SSPM platform for that sake. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to deep dive to the report, but before we dive in, just short introductions. I'm Maor, Chief Executive here at Adaptive Shield, joined by Matthew here. Matthew, you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matthew Rosenquist. I'm a CISO cybersecurity strategist. Been rummaging around cybersecurity for 34 years, trying to figure out how we all succeed at all of this.
Absolutely. Matthew, once again, thank you for joining in and, happy to, having this discussion and discuss, not only the findings, but also, kind of the general idea behind, SaaS security and its importance as well. So let's jump in just to clarify on what you're gonna see today as part of the agenda. And to be honest, we were doing, this presentation and these slides more or less, recently with Forrester themselves, right? And due to the large demand that we were getting, we realized, we should do another one. So that's that. Because I think, we haven't recorded the entire thing, last time, and, people were kind of really looking forward to getting, the recording. So we decided to just do another one and then, summarize it. So as far as that agenda goes, we're going to talk about, SaaS security trends and challenges this year, right? We're going to try to understand, how to build kind of a SaaS security program and how SSPM and other tools can be sort of like an enablers, in building, such a program. And then, Matthew and I, we're gonna probably have a short discussion about, the Forrester TEI study and, talk a bit more about the findings and try to understand. And also, being able to identify not only the benefits of the ROI you can get, but also what are the quality stuff you can get out of this research. And what I'll also try to do, and I'll try to, get everybody that is attending today, is how to sort of kickstart your own strong SaaS security program in a very, very high level. But we do have some more materials, on our website to cover that. Matthew, anything on your side you want to highlight as far as Judge Ginger goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we really have to be excited about is anybody can throw out, metrics or numbers or marketing material, but it's another thing to have an independent research organization come in and actually do the metrics, with a solid methodology, help peel back and really look at the situation. So I'm excited to go through these numbers to see what Forrester's come up with and really understand in this area of security, right? How can we make a difference with, again, real numbers? So not just the FUD that goes out there, but something tangible that we can say, yes, we're confident in this. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Me too. Let's dive in. You know what? Before we dive in, just two quick items just to, make sure everybody's aligned. Questions are welcomed, right? So feel free. I know you guys can't unmute yourselves, right? But feel free to use the chat in order to ask any questions. We have our team, and I'll try to also answer, some of the questions that we see uh, throughout this conversation. And also, if you want to kind of dive deeper into some more materials on SaaS security, we have plenty of materials on our resources page on our website. So feel free to visit it, during the presentation or right after or anytime you like. Um, And I think, and Matthew, we discussed it briefly, but I think, this is a very good start for the presentation. And, whilst I'm looking kind of at this slide, and looking about, these are actually recent news that, we're all seeing in the wild, right? And, seeing all these attacks that some of them, are due to a misconfiguration in your SaaS estate, or some of them, just threat actors, as I like to say, using good for bad, right? Using good features of these SaaS vendors to do bad stuff for, different organizations out there. And this reminds me, like 10 years ago, 9 years ago, where AWS and all the IaaS players, just started kind of, not just started, but started to picking up. I think, we were seeing similar trends, right? In AWS, S3 buckets, opened across the board with many organizations, still experience it. And, 9 or 10 years later, the CSPM and CNAPP space is a very mature space, and everybody understands today they kind of need a solution in place in order to tackle and address, these emerging threats. I think the same trend today we're kind of experiencing in SaaS security, whether, it's the ServiceNow breach that, you needed to configure some ACL rules, or where you talk about this SimiLogic breach where you had to kind of review each and every API key that you have in place and make sure, you're aligned with your current inventory of apps or API keys or non-human identities, right? Or when it comes to Microsoft Teams and the dark gate malware spread, which I found very, very unique in this space, right? Because you look at Teams as a trusted source, and you wouldn't kind of believe that someone external could, send a message to you. Not even talking about sending files, right? But sending a message. And this is kind of a configuration you can, tune within your own Teams environment, right? So first of all, you have a trusted source that kind of gets external messages from different sources. Second, you could prevent these threats from happening just by, tuning and hardening and going through the different environments. Yeah. Matthew, any insights on what we're seeing here?
Yeah, and you kind of brought it up like with cloud. When the world went to cloud, there was a whole bunch of tremendously positive reasons for doing that, for economies, for scale, for manageability. And we see that same type of benefit with SaaS. And there are all sorts of different vendors that are coming up, and they're being embraced because they add tremendous value. So there is a business pull to be able to use these types of tools. But, with all that wonderful power and benefit, it comes with equitable risk. And if, you're not personally managing your messaging team or something of that sort, you're kind of abdicating a lot of that security and oversight to these SaaS vendors. So as we all want to move to use and leverage and embrace SaaS solutions and vendors because of all the great benefits, we have to recognize that security has to come along with it. You can't just step back, like many companies did when they first migrated to cloud and said, "Oh, well, I'm going to Amazon. I'm sure it's secure." Well, no, it doesn't quite work that way, right? There takes effort, there takes visibility. And so we're in that trouble zone right now. And I think a lot of companies, big companies, look at these, right? Look at these names here. Big companies are having difficulty. Every company, whether they know it or not, is having difficulty. So, it's just one of those things. We want to embrace that benefit, but we have to be responsible and actually take, proactive steps to understand and manage the security.
You know what, Matthew? I must say, I'm 100%, aligned with that. And I'll tell you more than that. I think, you hit the nail on the head where you say the word responsible, right? Because at the end of the day, this is, as security experts, this is kind of our responsibility, right? And these SaaS vendors, they're doing a tremendous work in investing first and foremost, right, in security features So they keep adding more and more security features, giving us the granularity to go ahead and control it and make sure, it's aligned with our security policy in the organization, right? But eventually, it's our responsibility, right? And we need to be responsible as an organization to make sure, we align these different features and translate them to our security policy.
Yeah, default security out of the box really isn't that secure.
Yeah.
These vendors are doing great at creating features, including security features, but you can't just step back, right? Some of them aren't enabled. Many of them are not configured. So the capability is there,
Yeah.
but you have to take that step to understand what it is, configure it for your organization to align with your risk appetite and where you want to be from a risk perspective.
No, of
Default
course.
doesn't work.
No, but you have to kind of ask yourself, why this is a default feature, because SaaS vendors are obviously encouraging collaboration, right? And
Mhm.
this is totally understandable, right? But we need to make a decision whether this is something we actually want and should potentially invest in continuous hardening and continuous hygiene across the board. Um, and you know what, talking about, 10 years ago, right? I mean, and I love this slide, right? Because this is kind of illustrates very, very well the evolution of the market, and how, the good old on-prem is shrinking throughout the years, right? And cloud kind of becoming, huge. And when we think about, 2014, we had like the on-prem very good, very big with all the servers, all the application, all the different devices and all the offices, right? Everybody's used to come to the office back in the day. Um, and there was cloud, right? But it was very, very, small kind of still people were started to adopt it, but it was, kind of a small in terms of comparing to the on-prem. And throughout the years, we're seeing, more adoption and more a cloud presence, whether it's, cloud service and infrastructure and SaaS applications. And whilst Matthew, you said it right. I mean, these SaaS and cloud, tools, they letting us and enable us to be able to kind of make business more productive. However, it creates some sort of a complexity with, different enterprises needed, as we discussed earlier, invest in misconfigurations, invest in, different identities and different mistakes, permission kind of analysis they need to do and some other stuff that we need to do across the board. So, this is kind of the reason I really love this slide. But if we need to break down the problem, so we actually talking about, so if I need to ask myself, why this is so complex, so I like to break it down into, three avenues. So first of all, volume, velocities, lots of users using this environment, and you get connected to those environments from many devices as well. So what it means basically is, first and foremost, when we talk about the volume, each app is kind of a word unto itself, right? Salesforce is very different from Office 365, very different from Snowflake, very different from GitHub, right? You have like SaaS applications from any kind, basically. And when we talk about, the high volume, we actually saying, yeah, not only the vendors keep changing, those environments, but also, different users kind of can change, different configurations, different permissions. I, as a user, obviously use a device to log in. I need to understand whether this device is compromised. If so, I might be, try to do something about it, right? Change the password, delete the malware perhaps, or do some stuff. Second part is, lack of visibility, which is usually security teams, they kind of don't have access to those platforms because these are managed by the business, right? Which leads me to the third point, which the kind of struggle to manage those environments, right? Not only because of the lack of visibility, but also because of lack of knowledge base, right? I mean, e-file, and Matthew, you're a CISO, right? I mean, if you go to your Salesforce admin, and you'll ask them if the Salesforce secure. What's going to be the response? I mean, this is
Well, of course they're going to nod their head. Oh yeah, and what they're thinking is, yeah, it's the defaults and that's secure.
yeah, precisely. And this is I don't know if that surprises you or not, right? But this is kind of the usual responses that CISOs or security experts getting from their application owners. And the idea behind it is not to kind of fighting with each other and try to understand, is whether to bridge the gap between the teams, to arm security folks with the knowledge and being able to ask questions whilst being able to speak in the same language with the application owners. So when you want to speak with your Salesforce admin, you'll know what to ask them, and you'll know what to expect, and you know whether it was executed or not. So that's in my view, kind of summarizes the evolution of the market and why, and what challenges we're facing in this market.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing, right? So when we talk about that evolution from on-prem into cloud and SaaS, it's not just the services and the equipment and everything that is transferred, it's your sensitive data, right? Think about where your HR data is now. It's not in your data center anymore. It's in a SaaS application. And your
Right.
finance data. And also your engineering data. It's out on some third party store, and it's got security around it, right? Well, yeah, I think, well, have you checked? Have you configured? Has someone changed it? Who's connecting it how? And again, we have to understand our crown jewels, as part of this democratization, has also been distributed out into these SaaS platforms. So we have to recognize that's exactly why we have to pay so much attention. And we can't just abdicate the security and go, it's probably okay. You're going to lose. And we've seen big companies and small companies, the attackers are taking advantage of this. So yes, all these challenges, and they do compound upon each other, but it's not insurmountable. It can be addressed, right? It's not give up and go home. Like anything else in cybersecurity, you just got to dig your heels in, get the right strategy, get plans, tools, processes, and move forward. It is doable.
Right. And, I always like to say, we need to kind of invest in the same process we're doing for other segments, in our organization, like the same. We talked about continuous hygiene earlier, right? And hardening. And whilst you do that for devices, whether, it's your endpoint or servers, we call some of the processes that we do, we call it application control on your device, right? You need to do the same process for SaaS application. In some organizations, when it comes to SaaS applications, things are falling between the cracks, right? You want to implement the same process, but kind of, couldn't get that because you didn't have the visibility and didn't have the control. And, Matthew, when I think, and we talked earlier about the evolution, right, just now, and at Adaptive Show, we'll like to think about, the different use cases. And here, we kind of not only invest in one use cases as a company, and this is our vision and mission to address, all SaaS security use cases across the board, right? So not focusing only on, misconfiguration, or not focusing only on OAuth applications, so let's say, but to cover, all these different use cases and potentially more, because we, first of all, believe SaaS security is a journey, right? You start from somewhere, but you evolve throughout time. And second, SaaS is so rich and full with things you need to do, that you need to dive into each one of these items in order to work in a secure fashion, right? And it started from misconfiguration, right? And kind of the basic and foundation in every security program, right? But when we talk about, the non-human identities, which includes, third-party applications, include, API keys, includes, certificates. We understand that, those applications kind of present a huge risk to the organization and need to be managed as well. And not only that, when we talk about identities in general, we have the identity posture that we need to look into, whether it's, users or their permissions or the inventory for that. Say, Matthew, I was reading the DoD kind of approach for zero trust, and they talk about, users and what you need to do with users, right? And the first thing they say about users, what you need to do with your user is get an inventory. Understand, who the users in your organization, what access they have to which and to which applications, right? And after that, performing some kind of a process in permission trimmings, etc. Understand what data is exposed out there for external resources, etc. And whilst talking about users, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, it's all connected eventually to the device. So just getting the context of the user without seeing the full identity and understand what is the relationship of my device, my user, and the SaaS application I'm accessing to, this is you haven't done anything, right? Because Matthew, you can be an Office 365 admin that has 3 vulnerabilities on your device and your device is not encrypted. So obviously this is a priority for someone to fix. Now you can see all the devices, right? But you don't have the context without the context of the user. It's kind of very difficult to prioritize, urgent things. And just to summarize, and as an overall monitoring tool, right? You need to identify identity, threat detection and response capabilities, because, as you kind of sometimes, want to overlook an over-permissive user or a misconfiguration out there because you accept the risk as an organization, but you still need to have kind of a compensating control and monitor all the different events and make sure, this good feature is not being abused by, could be an external threat or inside threat, right?
Absolutely. And I'll go back to kind of what you were saying in regards to inventory. Inventory without context is only half the picture, right? Again, you have to understand not just who or what, but the relationship and what are the permissions and what should they be doing and not. And you've got a great list here on. And when I look at this, I actually kind of see it in 3 dimensions because it's not just doing this once. You have to continually look for misconfigurations. You have to continually understand when you're onboarding new third parties or you're offboarding, or the same for your employees or contractors or whomever, your interns. How many people get onboarded and offboarded throughout the year? And unfortunately, a lot of organizations are going, well, we audit that. Well, how often do you audit it? Once a year? Okay. So if an attacker may have a whole year of opportunity potentially if somebody didn't offboard something or understand what a bad machine is connecting. That's way too much time. And so the depth that I see here is this needs to be continuous. It's not a one and done. I'll do this once a year. Let's go check, right? Or assign a person and okay, start here and then move to this and move. And by the end of the year, start back. It doesn't work. We have to see it as this is an ongoing, living process for all the different changes and the micro changes that go on with our environment.
Right. I always like to say, it's the kind of new approach for not the new approach, but kind of the same process like you do in vulnerability management, right? I mean, this is the same continuous process you do in other segments in your organization, like vulnerability management, but to your SaaS application. Now, you're not scanning the vendors for vulnerabilities. This is their responsibility, but your responsibility is to make sure you kind of scanning the different features and understanding what can you utilize as an organization to really work in a secure fashion. Yeah. And this is great, because we're kind of this is another slide that I love because this kind of illustrate the process we need to do. So we touched, prevention and all the prevention mechanism we need to implement as an organization in order to first and foremost reduce our attack surface, and second, make sure that threat actors won't be able, it will be harder for threat actors to kind of infiltrate to your organization. The second layer that you need to implement as part of this triangle is the detection mode, making sure you go over the different IOCs, and IOCs can be really anything. You know, I just saw an article that Proofpoint recently released about malicious auth applications and released their IOCs of account takeovers with certain user agents, etc. But if you monitor just the IOCs, it can be very, very noisy, right? So you have to cross-ref the information with some, you know, anomaly and behavioral kind of patterns and TTPs as well, in order to reduce the number of alerts and make sure only alerts that are important are being surfaced to the SOC team. And for those alerts, for those high severity alerts, you need to kind of develop a response playbook that will potentially remediate the risk.
Yeah,
And
you know, it's a great triangle here. And with that prevention, it's not only the external attackers, it's potentially internal, either
absolutely.
intentional or unintentional, right? You get the new intern and you accidentally, as part of their identity, grant them way too many rights and permissions. They're seeing things and potentially they're editing or accidentally deleting or altering things. That becomes problematic as well, and they may expose things. So that prevention, that's where you get your highest return, is to make sure the tools are properly configured, you know, whether it be the systems that are connecting or the users onboarding and offboarding, whatever we want. But we know that's not always going to work, right? There will always be something that comes in. That's where our detection comes in, especially for those malicious attackers that want to do serious harm. We do that, and then we have to have that response, and then it feeds back in, right? Once you're in that response, you start to identify, well, what was the root cause? Maybe my tool wasn't configured. Maybe I need to lock it down a little bit more. How do I do that? And if I do it in one tool, how do then I do it to the rest of my tools in an efficient and timely manner? It
Right.
just all feeds back together as a continuous learning cycle.
And this is, you know, Matthew, this is part of the complexity we were talking, you know, before, right? You can do it maybe for one tool in kind of a manual, having a manual process. But if you want to have multiple manual processes, you know, in your organization, well, we know what's going to happen, right? I mean, this is, and, you know,
Yeah,
Matthew,
consistency and comprehensiveness will fall apart very quickly.
yeah, exactly. And, you know, as I promised Shiri earlier, I think, you know, this is a good time to pause and perhaps, you know, answer any questions before we move on to the next part.
Great. Yeah. I think that this is a good time to have some questions, you know, before we get to the main TEI study. So we got some extra questions coming in. What are some tips that you would suggest to empower business teams to take control of the SaaS security in conjunction with the security team and, you know, actively be involved in it?
Matthew, you're a CISO. I mean, you wanna take this one, or should
Yeah,
I,
I'll take
you
a
know,
shot at that.
yeah.
Yeah, first off, it really comes back to defining your goals. What is your risk appetite? What are you willing to do? And okay, where is all your critical data? Where are all your business critical systems? Where are those single points of failures? Chances are many of them are going to be in these SaaS applications. These, again, wonderful, powerful tools that you've embraced to really enable your business. So understand where the goals are, and then you've got to go through the normal process. And Maor was talking about that, right? You need to inventory, figure out what's really out there. You know, you've got shadow IT. Well, you also have shadow SaaS environments. You may not know all the SaaS tools everyone's signed up for and opened up your network to and put your data on. So you got to do that inventory. Then you have to take that proactive step and say, okay, now I've got to go in. I got to make sure I can see, I can configure. Does this align with those defined goals? but start with your goals. If you don't have that, you don't have an end state that you're moving towards, and you can be very chaotic and you're not going to be very efficient. So start with your goals, then figure out what you've got, and then go in and start managing that risk to your optimal level.
Yeah, that's great. 100%. So another question. You spoke about threat detection, and we understand that it's part of SSPM. What kind of threats are you referring to? Can you share some examples?
Yeah, I think when we talk about threats in SaaS environment and cloud environments, we talk about, first thing first, credential theft kind of attack. So this could be, whether an account takeover or some symptoms that, account takeover presents. And each one of those, like account takeover, can have, different use for threat actors. So for example, in Office 365, we usually see account takeovers in the form of business email compromise, right? Whether to kind of get into wire frauds or steal money, across the board. But it can be, in other SaaS applications, like in Workday, a common attack that we're seeing, these days is, a threat actor kind of hijacking a Workday account and changing the payment information for the employees. And by doing that, actually stealing money. So everybody is talking about, BC, business email compromise, and Office 365 account hijacking. But when it comes to, different SaaS applications like Workday, kind of no one talks about it. And we have plenty of examples that we're seeing in the wild, but just wanted to, just give those two samples just to, help us understand better the risk and what we're facing with.
Okay, great. I think, we'll leave it there and we'll ask the rest of the questions at the end, and, give you time to really dive into the next section.
Excellent. Perfect. So what we're going to do now at this section is we're going to kind of drill down to the report. And once again, you can go ahead and we released this report in January this year, but you can go ahead and access the full report, on our website. And what I'll try to cover, some of the highlights of the report. So just as a customer profile for you to understand who was collaborating with Forster here in order to make it happen, and for you to be able to also learn from their use case. So as we said earlier, this is a $10 billion corporation in the field of media and information services. CISO is obviously a good friend of ours and mine personally, to be honest. And the headquarter of this company is in Europe. So yeah, this is the company profile, and this is what the CISO, had to say, just had to quote him, as part of this kind of report. But you can find all of it in the report. So, they started kind of the journey in looking after, misconfigurations and try to understand, what they need to do, because they had some incidents that kind of served as a wake-up call for them. Like the examples we see at the beginning, right? This is something they need to do across the board in order to really kind of, once again, work in a secure fashion in their SaaS estate. So as we said, this was covered by Forster. And when we talk about the key results, so we're talking about 201%, ROI. And when we talk about the value and payback that we get, so we can see, these great numbers, right? And we can tell, that even though, the report is being spreaded, into multiple years, we're talking about, a payback of less than 6 months of investment, which is pretty huge when you think about, an organization at this size, right? So this is awesome. Matthew, anything you want to highlight before we move on and dive deeper?
Yeah, I've implemented a lot of projects. Fortune 100 companies, projects in the 7, 8, and 9-figure digit, literally. Um, the ROI, that's amazing, right? A 6-month ROI, and it makes a lot of sense. Again, as we're kind of pushing this data and the risks and so forth out, being able to manage that. If you don't have a capability that can do this continually, you've got to throw people at it. And then you have to train those people and everything else. So the ROI makes a lot of sense here when I'm looking at this. And payback in less than 6 months, anything that's less than 2 or 3 years is normally a good investment to make. So less than 6 months, yeah, that then becomes a no-brainer here. And I love to see those, the net present value and so forth, and in the millions of dollars. I know we're going to get into those numbers because I'm interested to see, where is that coming from? And I've got some suspicions. I know where it's coming from, which is going to help in many different ways. It's going to be an amplified effect. It's not just a one-time, here you go. It will help, I think, the entire organization get better in many different areas. So I'm
Right.
looking for the next few slides.
Let's dive in. So, first of all, when we look at the SaaS security posture, so, before the organization, implemented Adaptive Shield, they couldn't really see, all the configurations across the board because Matthew, as we discussed earlier, how could you, right? It's not really possible. And being able to be aware and being in control of all these, level of security, and I'm not talking even about the fact of the limited, kind of monitoring and held they had in those environments. But after the deployment, kind of were able to increase, at 30% their kind of visibility. And the reason it's 30% because the idea of onboarding, new apps and working with the app owners kind of takes time, and this is something you need to do, across the board. But you know when you look at the expected number of incidents in 1 year to 3 years, that kind of decreased by investing in those continuous. And one thing you can do, I see in many environments, in many customers' environments, threat actors performing kind of attacks that's supposed to disappear from the word, like brute force attacks, right? When you think about SaaS application and the new word, you kind of dismissing it, right? How could it be, right? But it's still happening, and it's still happening a lot, right? And by doing, small things in your environment, for example, reducing the number of users that have access to legacy protocols, or implementing a more thorough process of MFA to local users, because people kind of implement SSO and they think, yeah, we're secure, we have everything we need. No, you have local users that most likely are the most powerful users in your organization with lots of permissions that you need to also take care of and invest in those native security controls. So this is kind of the first item that we can dive into. And when we look at the other one, like another 70% efficient in misconfiguration detection. So obviously, when we started a company like 4 or 5 years ago, we talked with lots of people about SaaS security, and they all said, yeah, we have a questionnaire in place when we're doing this third-party risk assessment. But once again, that's not helpful at all when you think about, SaaS security, because you need to dive in internally to, the implementation and deployment of those SaaS security. And as you said, Matthew, and you mentioned it earlier, right? Doing it once a year and review those SaaS application once a year, just not enough, right? And by being able to do it in a continuous way and continuous monitoring, communicating on all the different configurations that we're fixing and significant stuff that you need to address as part of your detection and drifting that happening in your environment, this what made the difference for them.
Yeah, and there's really a cause and effect here, because when we look at manual oversight and configurations of especially new SaaS tools, right? When you get a new big SaaS tool and everyone's excited and you have a product owner and they're going to dive into it and they're going to learn and, okay, I have to configure it this way. But over time, that oversight actually erodes, right? That person gets other jobs, other roles. It's already configured. I don't need to go look at that. It becomes deprioritized.
Right.
So your consistency over time erodes. And when that person moves on and a new person comes in, they're told, yeah, we've got this. We oversee that. It's doing fine. Well, they've got to learn all these other things as well, and they will never dive into it as much as the first person, right? It was their original baby. And so over time, it is human nature that security erodes. So when we take that out of the equation and we make it more consistent and we make sure that it's comprehensive, that leads us to that effect where you get that 30%, less risk that you have to deal with. And that's a force multiplier. How would you like 30% less incidents to respond to? 30% less crisis events? Yes, that makes a big difference for the entire team, for everybody, and the organization itself. So it becomes that force multiplier for this blind spot that unfortunately gets bigger and bigger year over year with only manual oversight and supervision.
Everybody wants that, I guess, right? Yeah. Moving forward, so obviously compliance is a huge driver, when you talk about configuration. I mean, we touched earlier on the idea behind, IaaS configurations, right? And AWS and GCP and Azure. And when you look at the CIS benchmarks and you look at those like NIST and those compliance frameworks, it helps you kind of understand and answer the question, how secure am I? Right. And, obviously, not obviously, but, this organization before implemented Adaptive Shield spent lots of time, obviously, in try to answer the question, how secure are we, whilst, trying to do it and compare it to compliance frameworks. And by having this automation, utilizing the different features in Adaptive Shield, comparing them to the different compliance frameworks, security benchmarks, etc., they were able to kind of get lots of value out of it and translate it directly to money, right? And value that they're getting, out of it. So Matthew, again, you're a CISO, and I'm sure compliance is a huge part of your day-to-day. What do you think about that?
Well, the ugly C word, compliance, for those companies in highly regulated fields. And maybe you're a government contractor or supplier. Maybe you're in healthcare or finance. Compliance is a big, big part of cybersecurity. And it's tough to make sure that you remain compliant, and you can attest to that, and you're not going to lose contracts or ratings or things of that sort. So there tends to be a lot of resources thrown at it. And again, if you've got a lot of manual resources, one person doesn't have necessarily the skills, the insights, the experience as another, and people go on vacation and all these other things. It becomes a big sink of time and effort. So if you can find something that brings that consistency and comprehensiveness over time, now you can start reallocating those resources to other areas that you need to manage risk, and you can get a better and more confident picture. I talk with a lot of CISOs and they go, yeah, we've got a whole compliance team and everything, and lots of work going on there. And then I'll ask them kind of, quietly, just between me and them, but how confident are you?
Yeah.
And they'll look at me and go, well, we got a lot of people there. We do a lot of work. We fill out a lot of forms. Okay. But, again, consistency and comprehensiveness, that's where it starts to break down. So, for something like this, and I'm looking at the 2,400 hours annually managing controls. Yeah, I totally get that. How many headcount is that? How much time is that? And so there's the effort, but there's also the quality over time that we have to look at as well. So yeah, anything that can help that can give you that big ROI. Definitely.
And I'll tell you more than that. I think it's not only that, you invest and invite, auditors like Deloitte, EY, those guys, KPMG, right, to your organization in order to perform. And, by utilizing, such tools, you can easily help them do their job, in a better way, right? And this is exactly what we're talking about here. I think, when we talk about the money value here, when we talk about collaboration between the teams, the money value, sorry, here is the lowest. However, in my opinion, when talking about, the importance of in the long run, right, this is probably the highest value, because before deploying adaptive shield, the security team really struggled with engaging with the application owners. And again, it's not that they're not, friends or not nice people, right? It just they couldn't speak in the same language. And this comes back to the example we spoke about it earlier, Matthew. If you go ahead to your application owners, if it's a Salesforce admin or NetSuite admin, you ask them if the NetSuite is secure, we already learned what's the response going to look like. And when talking about, the idea behind, the importance of bridging this gap is exactly this. And security teams and business owners needs to kind of work together in order to really increase their security and getting, long-term benefit and extended beyond the quantified value that we're seeing here.
Yeah, I would say ignore the 2%. Simply because it is not reflective of that true value you're talking about. Cybersecurity is a team sport, and especially with these SaaS applications, it's going to be the business group that owns those. So it's their application. And the last thing they want, honestly, they don't want to see the call coming from security. They don't want to see the email coming from security saying, hey, it's not secure, you have to do this. It becomes a confrontational type of engagement, and that doesn't benefit either side. So with an automated tool that can show the business unit, hey, this is your security, this is something that just cropped up, you own it, you can take care of it, and they can avoid the security call, they can avoid, because they can go fix it. It becomes just part of the normal care and maintenance of their system, of the productivity and use of their system. And that change in mindset is fantastic, because instead of adversarial, as you mentioned, it becomes much more collaborative.
Right.
And then when the call does come in, it's not I'm harassing you, it's I need your help, right? And that becomes a bi-directional situation that comes up. And that product owner may turn around and be calling security, which is really what you want, and saying, hey, I see something in my tool here, I can't fix it, or something's going on. Security, can you help? That fundamentally changes the dynamic. And it showcases how security is now helping the business unit instead of hindering it. And that's what you need.
Exactly. I mean, this is spot on, really spot on. Yeah, and obviously when we talk about, additional benefit that you can get, and just to, summarize. So obviously we talked about, security and controlling, those different SaaS application with visibility and control, which relates directly to being in compliance as well. Being able to getting into a process of democratization of those SaaS applications, right? Being able to, as Matthew just said, right? Being able to delegate security responsibility also to application owner, but still, being in control. And being able to continuously monitor the needs that you kind of seen as an organization in SaaS security across the board, and being able to monitor these different trends. Because when we see, new feature coming in, so we obviously gonna need to tackle those when we see a breach in the news, right? The immediate questions that we ask ourselves: am I breached? right? Do I need to do something about it? Or when I see, you know, a new trend in my own environment when it comes to threat detection, I'm missing other users that might, you know, fall in between the cracks. Do I need to implement my own custom detections and IOCs in order to catch all the different, you know, users in my environment? So all these questions and benefits, you know, should come to mind when you consider kind of an implementation of a solution. And capabilities, when we talk about the capabilities, I think we touched it earlier when we talked about the different use cases, but just wanted to bring over these two squares, right? In order to, just for you to have it like in one place and try to understand it. And I think, you know, and I think also someone asked the question earlier about, you know, the number of applications that Adaptive should support. So, you know, across the board, we support more than 140 or 150 applications out of the box. And I think this is one of the most important things that you need to look for when you look for SaaS security solutions, right? The breadth of applications, but also the depth, not only the features, but also for each and every applications, being able to dip in each one of those applications in a very, very, you know, deep level and understand the different stuff that you can do within them.
Yeah, I would emphasize and say this is probably one of the most important factors when you're looking or evaluating an SSPM. An SSPM can be great, but if it only handles 5 of your cloud tools, really, is that really going to be a benefit? You know, it's got to encompass the breadth of the SaaS tools that you're using. That's where you're going to get scales of efficiency. So for me, you know, the integration aspect, the coverage, that is paramount in understanding and realizing the value of this, not only when you install it and turn it on, but that continuous cycle, right? As risks change and more apps come in and everything else, you have to maintain that. So crucial, absolutely crucial.
Yep. It's an ever-changing environment. You know, this is kind of so I know I promised, you know, to give you some idea about how to kickstart your own SaaS security program, and I'm gonna do it real quick because we don't have much time, and I want to also, you know, answer some questions. But the idea behind it is to mapping and planning, right? This is the first thing. Second is, you know, executing the plan, and last but not least, you know, evaluating and potentially using a tool to help you kind of maintaining the program that you kind of started working on. So when we talk about mapping and planning, you first and foremost, Matthew touched it briefly earlier, map all your important assets and SaaS applications that you feel kind of crucial. And it could be, you know, starting from Office 365 and Salesforce and moving on to Miro, right? Which is very, very popular these days, but not considered to be like a main app in your organization, but very, very popular. Lots of users are using it and containing very, very sensitive information. And then identify, you know, the different stakeholders and the application owners, so you'll have a direct channel and someone to work with. And when we try to or think about, you know, the execution, so yeah, we need to identify, you know, the apps for the pilot and start measuring, you know, the different, like what is the starting point of the posture we're seeing and setting up, you know, long-term, short-term and long-term goals, to be honest. And how do we measure, you know, our performance throughout time? And through this process, you also need to make sure you have other stuff in your way. So defining, you know, what are the items you want to focus on, whether it's devices, privileges, permissions, misconfigurations, identity-centric threats, or all the above, right? You need to decide what is important to you as part of the execution part. And then, you know, you need to understand whether, you know, this is something you want to kind of, if this is a small organization, maybe this is something that you can include within your team, or if it's a bigger organization, you have lots of SaaS applications that you're utilizing, probably want to consider a tool and allocate the relevant budget in order to select the tool that is a fit for you. Yeah, so for me, just the key takeaways, and I'm just going to leave it at these, not going to cover, each one of those because we discussed it, throughout the conversation, and I do want to leave some time for questions as well. Matthew, anything you want to highlight, before we move on to the question section?
Yeah, especially if you've got a lot of SaaS applications, you're not going to be, as they say, be able to eat the elephant in one bite. So prioritize those, build that into your process, learn the tools, and start expanding out from the most critical forward. I would also say make sure you incorporate the use of this tool as part of your tabletop exercises, right? If you're doing crisis drills, and as part of your crisis response plan. A tool like this is hugely powerful. I led an incident response team, Fortune 100 company. I know what it's like. This type of visibility is incredibly valuable. And Maor brought up an example a few slides back. You see attacks going on in your sector, your peers, and there's notifications, documentation. You should be able to grab those indicators of compromise, and you want to look in your environment. Are we vulnerable? Which systems? And so this is a great tool to gain that visibility very quickly. And if needed, you can then up your security either temporarily or permanently to be able to manage those risks.
Thank you, Matthew. As always, great insights. Yeah, let's hear some more questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much, Maor. That was really interesting, really excellent. We don't have time for a lot of questions, but let's just dive in and we'll see what happens. So we have a question about looking to address time to value. How long does it take from the moment you connect your apps to the monitoring platform until you're able to start seeing initial results? And then how long does it typically take to stabilize the posture?
Yeah, I think this is a platform related question, so I'll try to answer, briefly. Eventually, it depends in the organization, but as soon as you connect the app and got the permission in place, it literally takes minutes to kind of, start seeing value and start seeing the analysis of the platform. And it's really the effort of, getting those permissions in place in order to start performing the analysis. So to your question, to the question, and as a short answer to a long answer was that, but the short answer would be, minutes if you have the permissions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a hard data point, right? The white paper shows a customer that got a break-even point within 6 months.
Yeah.
They got a break-even point. So they had to get value starting early to be able to hit that, I'll tell you.
Right.
Yeah. The next question is sorry, let me just find it again. So looking at how important do you think it is to implement a SaaS security program?
Let me take a shot at this one. It's as important as the data, the services, and the criticality of your business that relies on those SaaS applications and services. If you're not using SaaS applications and services, or you're using one for a minor thing that really isn't business critical, it's not going to be that important to you. However, you got your HR and your engineering and your finance data, and you're using it to collaborate and communicate with your shareholders and your employees and your contractors and your third-party vendors, and you're in a regulated field and they require attestation and you have to have audits. It's that important.
Yeah, 100%. Very, very true. Okay, so just another one. We had an additional question about which team should be leading the SaaS security program.
Yeah, I can maybe, share what we're seeing, in different customers' environments. So usually the team that lead SaaS security programs or using, SSPM tools across the board, or exposure management, people who are responsible for vulnerability management in the organization. So this is what we're seeing in the wild. And obviously, this has an effect on GRC cybersecurity teams as well, and security operations teams as well. Matthew, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, two things. I would agree with you. The GRC, especially if you're in a highly regulated area, is probably going to want to either have direct access to it or to own it. And then also if you have an application security team, and again, depending on your organization, if you've got a lead in that, definitely. But the second point is no matter which team owns it, you need to have CISO buy-in. Right? They are the ones that need to kind of be the shepherd of this and make sure that this is successful and that you're getting the value out of it, because it is a powerful tool, can be used by many different groups. And we wouldn't want one group to just kind of hoard the tool and only see the output and get the benefit. You want to make sure the benefit is experienced by all the groups, including the product development teams.
Great. Thank you so much. That is all the time we have. If your question was not answered, then we will reach out to you via email, and we'll be sending out the recording to everyone who registered to the webinar as well, and you can contact us through there. Thank you so much for your time, Matthew. Thank you, Maor. And yeah, this was a great and really interesting session.
Thank you, everybody. Matthew, as always, enjoyed the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great discussion.
Bye-bye.
Bye.